Hey, folks, and welcome to Counter Clipping Show number 123 for May 8th, 2023. Our topic tonight is it's strategic Napoleonics, which is a topic that we have touched upon before. But I'm including some more stuff this time and maybe have a few more things to say about specific games, even though we did not get to play Empires in Arms at Winterfest this year. So that is unfortunate. We are clipping, as you can see, Battles for the Ardennes. Thank you, Mark Ruggiero, for selling me this. It is in very nice shape, other than the counter registration, which obviously is not Mark's fault, which is not great, but I've seen worse. And it's, I would say, about a third punched too. So other than that, and other than standard shelfware for a game that's pushing 50 years old, I think that's pretty good. We are drinking Ardbeg Wee Beastie 5 years, and you can taste every one of them. This is bottled at a generous 47.4%, and it's pretty young and honestly pretty rough. But fortunately, the roughness gets buried in all the peat. The Ardbeg peat character is not my favorite, but I still like Ardbeg. It's pretty good, and I do like smoky Scotch. So it is very drinkable, and the folks who brought it over here for Christmas didn't like it. So here I am trying to kill it. So that's otherwise good. So let me put the ticker up, because we're going to need that, because we've got 2 giveaways today of War Diary magazines. And just like last week, we'll try to get to one in the first half an hour or so, and we'll do one in probably the last half an hour. And then once we're out of these, eventually we will run out. I've got some more stuff that we can do giveaways on that comes out of my personal stash. So we're going to have giveaways for the next several weeks. For those who didn't know, it was my birthday weekend this past weekend. I'm 52, and I'm fortunate to be fairly well preserved. But part of the reason I don't look my age is I'm fat, and the fat keeps the skin nice and taut, stretches out all the wrinkles. If I lose weight, I will probably look my age, which is a problem. But I'd rather also not be fat. So there's that. So before we get started, let me remind everybody to thumbs up the video, subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed already. Super chats and super stickers are on. That is one way to guarantee your comment gets seen and read out loud, because otherwise I might miss it, because we're probably going to have lots and lots of folks in here. We almost have 100 here already. I didn't set the pictures up, but I posted them on social media. I visited a couple of game stores. We'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. In addition to my kind of birthday present to myself that I picked up, you know what I'm saying, which I'll show off in a minute. If you'd like to do more to support the channel, there is a link to all the different ways to do that in the video description. The best way is the Patreon. We did release new counter tray designs to swordsman and up-level patrons for May. I barely made that, having just gotten back from Buckeye Game Fest, where we had a fabulous time, as you know if you watched last week. So, I'm usually the youngest wargamer in the room. Not always, but a lot of times I am. And I'm okay with that. But it's nice when I'm not the youngest gamer in the room. You know what I'm saying? Which is weird, actually, thinking about it. But yeah, this is the Danny Parker SPI Classic. Got a very good reputation. It looks really good. I didn't pull that up, damn it. So we're gonna have to try and say hello to everybody in the chat itself, which is normally a pain in the nuts. So let's say hello and salutations to Vince Ree, Iggy Cricktal, Rob Johnson, Ed Holtzman, Stacking Limit, Dale Brady, Dicey Odds, Michael Schmaus, Michael Aarons, 6 Actual, Doug Blayart, E4 Airman from Central Ohio. Stigler is in the house. Stigler asks if there's enough strategic Napoleonics games for 2 hours of content. Yeah, I think there are. But plus, it's not like I don't waste any time on this stream. I mean, come on. Alan Salazar, Carl Crater from the War Game Boot Camp, Jack P, Meandering Mike, HUN644, Paperless Writer, Mark McNair. I gotta remember to not read off the Stream Elements bot when it shows up. Matt Taylor, if I didn't get you yet, Christopher Smith, Vicky, welcome back to the stream. Jeffrey Wesovich, Jeffrey Edwards, David Thompson is in the house, and congratulations to David for winning his Undaunted Stalingrad 1 Wargame of the Year in the Golden Geek Awards. Congrats also go out to Liz Davidson of Beyond Solitaire, whose Beyond Solitaire podcast came in as a runner up in Best Podcast. And I haven't listened to the other two podcasts that are on that list, and I'm sure hers is better. So hello to Slate Slab Rock, nice Flintstones-esque name there. Egret, let's see, Pete 41, Todd Cox, Daniel Brown, John Clark, Chad Kennedy, Jeff Anderson. I probably repeating names here. Lynn Pratt from Central Ohio. Kilroy of Kilroy was here. Brian Strelnikov is back. Welcome back. Lee Grant, William Bird, Joe Mentum, Brian Gash, Stephen Roberts, Scott Bell, Tim Greenhaw, Cyber Field Marshal, John Stanley, Brent McCabe, McFud Pucker, Daniel Silverthorne, the legend himself, Fucko, is here. Joe Okabayashi. Let's see. Joe Perez is back. Joe, thanks for stopping by. Frank Shiuli. I at least get a coherent list if I use YouTube for this function. Trent Turner, if I didn't get you yet, and I don't think I did. Peter Rushton, Jeff Taylor. John Longshore is, of course, here. H. Tuna, Neil Badkey, Tim Zales. So everything is good. All right. So I think we are caught up on that at least. Anyway, so a new, I did kind of treat myself. So I did treat myself to a game purchase. Let me put it that way. And it was not a particularly cheap game, but I got a lot with it. That game is this Europa Universalis, The Price of Power. I did film an unboxing video of it in which I said a variety of stupid shit, so that is not gonna probably make it in its current form, but I may try to do it as a voiceover because it's like a 40-minute video. And that's an awful lot of content to waste. So the game looks really good. I have actually had a chance to play a short session of it, so thanks again to Liz. And the more I see of it, the more I like it. It has been described to me as a war game. It has been described to me as a Euro, and it has been described to me as the most complicated game you have ever seen. At which I absolutely laugh. Now it isn't like it's not shoots and ladders, but it's average complexity as war games go, I would say, and I would certainly call it a war game. It's definitely got a military element. It's just got a somewhat more robust political and economic model attached to it than most war games get, which is an interesting touchstone for our topic tonight, because most or all of these games are going to have some of those elements as well. Why are we not scrolling in this stupid machine? So the rule book, however, is a Euro style rule book, and it is one of those rule books that decides it's going to use icons for in place of words. So instead of saying spend a diplomatic point, it'll say spend a thing that'll be some symbol. And that takes some getting used to. Now, the other game that I have that does this is the Traveler customizable card game, which for that reason I found absolutely impenetrable. And this is a little better, but that may be because I am familiar with some of the symbology from the PC game, which I have put probably 80 or 100 or so hours into, even though I still absolutely completely suck at it. So there is some video of that on I think it's on the might be on this channel, but I thought it was on the digital channel. It's been a while since I've touched it. And I am numerous expansions behind at this point. Although I feel warm and fuzzy enough about the board game that I kind of want to play the computer game. This is very much an adaptation of the PC game rather than a new implementation of the original Europa Universalis board game by Azure Wish from the 90s, maybe late 80s, early 90s, something like that. Which is good because that was kind of a famously impenetrable game, and I frankly think that as the years have gone by, the computer versions of Europa Universalis have gotten better on the average, right? Not that there have been no missteps; there have been missteps, but it would, I think, have been an error to try to do a direct new take on the original game. And this is not that. This does not pretend to be that. There was a Kickstarter for it, which I did not get in on, but I have better than Kickstarter. I got a buddy who buys 2 of everything. So I bought his extra copy, which included all the deluxe stuff. And if you do buy this thing, by the way, I believe, unless you are really waffling on it and want to save a couple bucks, strongly recommend the deluxe edition, which has a quote unquote expansion, but it's not an expansion. It's kind of built in, and you're not getting the whole thing if you don't get um, the deluxe edition. So you only get one map, and you get like half the scenarios and more than half the stuff. But you'd really want, if you end up liking it at all, you're definitely going to want the other one. Now you can buy all the deluxe extra material in a quote unquote expansion. None of which is listed on BGG, by the way. And this thing covers from 1444 to 1821, which is plus or minus a year or two, pretty much the same as EU4. Scott Bell mentions the Kickstarter, which just launched, Oceans of Fire from Compass Games. That's one of Compass's patented late ways to pre-order Kickstarters, which there's nothing wrong with. You still get the same discount, I think. And it rustles up reliably an extra couple hundred orders for these things, which at the economy of scale these companies are working at is significant, right? It's not necessarily going to turn a dog into a success, but it's significant. So I totally sympathize with them doing it that way, and why not, right? Other than giving Kickstarter a cut. So we do have other pre-order news. So let me pull that up. This is OCS Crimea. This is one map game, one map, 3 counter sheets. It's on pre-order right now. It is doing pretty good, approaching its pre-order number. It's at what's it need? 650. It's at 254, considering it's only been up for a couple of days. That's not too bad. Now, there were kind of 2 Crimea games, OCS Crimea games in the works, one of which was by Tony Burkett, which would link with the Third Winter, and the other of which was done by Guy Wild, and which covered the 41-42 campaigns in the Crimea. And this box contains both of those things. I was briefly involved in the playtest for this very early on. I happen to think it's pretty good. I have only played the 41-42 stuff, but I liked what I saw. So a new OCS game is of course not incredibly inexpensive, but it's less expensive if you are A, in the US, and B, able to pay the pre-order price rather than the MSRP that will come along later. We're pulling the rest of the Americans out of the tray here. These are clipping fairly well, by the way. That isn't always the case with SPI counters. Sometimes they're not quite perfectly square, and not quite perfectly square does not play nice with this clipper. So, all right. So if you're interested in that, go ahead and check it out. Like I said, it's over on the mmpgamers.com website. And I'm pretty excited about it. Obviously, I believe I was pre-order number 12 in this case. And that was only because I was like outside and I didn't want to try and fiddle with this on the phone, which is always a pain in the ass. And I always end up screwing, well, not always, but too often I have ended up screwing something up doing this on the phone. So I didn't. The GTS magazine, GTS Briefings, is also out. We saw an unboxing of that from me last week. That also looks very good. Also contains a whole game, Counter Strike, which is the SAR game that's been in the works for some time from Joe Chacon and the GTS team. And we should see, although I hope it's not soon because I'm out of money right now, the pre-order for GTS Utah Beach, which ought to be showing up soonish. I really hope it's like 2 or 3 months from now, to be honest. So Christopher Smith asks, if he has Case Blue, does he need the same map again? The answer to that is that this covers more of that campaign than Case Blue did, and the map is different. It's basically the same map, but the map orientation is slightly different. So this one will actually hook into the Third Winter. Your Case Blue map will not align properly. So, and this has been up for pre-order for 2, maybe 3 days, something like that. I think it's probably more like 2. So this is true, except for the upcoming cross-channel attack. Yeah, this is essentially accurate. Or if we ever see the legendary OCS Italy, but that seems like a very challenging topic in OCS. And I have not. I'll be delighted if I'm wrong, but I would be a little surprised if we ever actually saw that. That's been in development basically forever. Um, all right. So, what else do we have? I don't have anything to prep right now. I don't really need to prep for Origins, which it. Ooh, shit. That reminds me, I got to cancel hotel reservations for Origins because I made a different hotel arrangement. I have not done that. That is a problem if I get stuck with two hotel bills for Origins. So we need to make sure we get that done tonight. Would be great. I don't know if I can actually do that tonight though. So I got a better hotel. It's more expensive, but it's not full price because I'm splitting it with somebody. So but it's much more amenable to actually staying at the convention and doing stuff rather than having to commute back and forth to Grove City from downtown Columbus. Not desirable, and that's what the situation was looking like before. So I have not kept up with hockey in a long time, and of course, in Cleveland, we never had a hockey team in my memory anyway. I don't know about lifetime. Um, I believe so. Chad Kennedy says that Tony has been trying to resolve the map orientation to connect Case Blue to third winter, but there are some orientation issues. I believe Tony has those solved, but as of 6 months ago, maybe. But um, that did require a slightly different orientation for Crimea itself. So and as Christopher Smith points out, I'm pretty much whatever. Just shut up and sell it to me is pretty much my OCS position at this point. It's also true of GTS and GCACW and probably Line of Battle from MMP and I'm forgetting a BCS. Whatever they do for BCS, I'll be happy to buy at this point. The Cleveland Barons did exist, but I don't remember that. So um, I do not have any recollection of the Cleveland Barons whatsoever. Um, so Jeff Beeler says that OCS cross-channel attack will probably just have one amphibious attack, unless you count the beaches separately, right? Then you might have as many as six, if you count Point to Oak. But yeah, that's fair. And Dragoon is not included. The southern France is not in the map. So that I can tell you. This is the part of northern France that will hook up map wise to Beyond the Rhine, but there is no integration with Beyond the Rhine, and the unit scale approach in both games is different. So you will have problems if you try to fold the end of cross channel attack into Beyond the Rhine. I do not believe that to be a desirable situation, but that's where it was when I last saw it. It doesn't mean that's where it is now. So, I mean, there's been a variety of minor league hockey teams in Cleveland too, and I actually did go to some Cleveland Lumberjacks games back when they were around. So, in any case, what do we got left? So, yeah, I don't have anything to prep for. So we had a very enjoyable sitting with Labatai at Buckeye Game Fest again, as you know, if you watched last week's show. And I'll definitely be playing that again. I'm gonna probably rant for another minute before I get to the topic. Yeah, then I'm going to do a giveaway, and then we're going to get to the topic. So, one of the things that some of the fancier, say, call them mainstream board games, are doing now is these kind of bespoke trays and storage solutions for games. Okay, and Europa Universalis has these. So there's seven of these. Is that right? I think there's seven of these things. One for this one is like the generic table tray. The other ones, you each like major power gets one. There's more major powers than six, but the colors become interchangeable. So they're tagged by colors. This particular tray fits really tight, and I think the sorting is fairly awkward. In addition, the card tray that sits in the bottom of the box is wholly inadequate. So I have been printing card trays for designed and printed. Those will make it into next month's 3D printed storage solutions file repository for patrons. So, and I'm going to need both the minis. This thing uses American size cards for some reason. and American Minis and American Standards. So those are the two that I'll have. European poker size cards are actually much more common for board games, at least for board games. And for some reason, they went with American sizes for this, but that's what I have. So, and I don't have. Do I have anything? I might do some European sizes too, actually, in the long run, because I do have things like Nations in Arms. Empires in Arms does not have cards, which we will talk about tonight. So, in any case, there is a link to the Ardwulf Lair Discord server in the video description. If anybody wants to hop in, there's regular chatter in there now. It's doing really well. So I'm very happy with that. That is a link that will expire after a while. So if you're watching this after the fact, tune in to the latest counter clipping show to get the latest link. And I've set it up so that it's got a limited number of uses, but it lasts for more than a day. So if it's like Tuesday, you can probably still use it, for example. Um, so Stigler, the point. Let me touch on Stigler's point here, because this is a favorite hobby horse of Stigler's. All this effort to keep your games in a box instead of on the table. I don't get it. So the point is not necessarily to have the box look pretty. The point is to facilitate setup and takedown of the game so that you don't have to reorganize it between plays. The intention here is to facilitate play rather than stopping play. And when I played it on Sunday morning, we played it on Tabletop Simulator, which I don't think there's a Vassal module for this thing, but there is a Tabletop Simulator module. I have no clue what I'm doing in Tabletop Simulator. So, and Discord picked that morning to take a dump too. So I'm not sure what's up with that, but the table. So, like Vassal, Tabletop Simulator is very dependent on the quality of the module. And in this case, there's two different Europa Universalis Price of Power modules, and I've only tried one, so maybe the other one's better. But the one that I've got does not have scenario setups. It's basically has a little sign when you go into the module that says, "Fuck you, set it up yourself." I think that's fairly undesirable state of affairs to leave things in. So I'm hoping that the other module it does not do that. So not thrilled with that, because this is not going to be an incredibly quick setup. You basically build like a custom deck for each scenario, events deck for each scenario, and that might be true of the Monarch points decks too, the diplomacy deck and the military deck and all that stuff. There's a lot of decks in this thing, not to say the least. There's a lot of cards. There's a lot of there is an element of tableau building. There is also a marketplace that works just like the marketplace. The marketplace here works there's less cards on it, but works just like the marketplace in PAX Premier. So you pull an event or buy an event, that you do that event, and then you put currency on the other events to make them more attractive to people. So so anyway, all this hockey talk in the chat is going totally over my head for the most part. So anyway, let's move on to a giveaway, and I'll pull this back up. And this is, once again, this is going to be for a subscription to War Diary magazine, courtesy of Mark Ruggiero. We all extend our best wishes to Mark, of course, and Mark is kind of doing this as a thanks to the community, and Mo's got some subscriptions to give away as well. So if anybody hasn't seen War Diary magazine, it is excellent. It is worth your time, and even better if you could get a complimentary subscription to it. So with that in mind, hashtag War Diary is what you will put in the chat. Now, if you should win, you must send me an email at ardwulfslair@gmail.com. That's the email address that is in the ticker, with your information, and I will get that to the appropriate authorities if you should win. No one. Are we having connectivity issues? I wonder. Nobody has. Oh, there we go. Looks like we might have had a little bit of lag there, but there's a huge block. We might actually have. You guys might actually have lagged out the server. So that's even better. So the magazine is great. Highly recommended by me. I've done several previews and just have not had the time to do any more. Among other numerous things that I have not had the time to get accomplished. Things are going to loosen up a little bit by the end of the month, but then we're back into June and Origins and all that. Um, so there's not a ton of extra stuff like that. Thanks, Kim. Much appreciated. Eric from Eric's Table Napoleonic Battles. Mo Romaniuk is back. Daniel Brown. Um, Ron Nicholson from sunny. Today it was sunny, actually, Central Ohio. Big Chirp One. Does Twitch chat count? Pretty sure it does. This is actually a StreamYard utility, so Twitch should actually work no problem. And there is, as usual, one person watching on Twitch, and actually three watching on Facebook. So Facebook ought to count too. So we are being clear. So Neil Badkey just got his first issue today. Awesome, awesome. Let us know how you think of it. Advanced Squad Leader Spotting Round. Welcome to the stream. I think you've been here before, but Searball 1600, welcome to the stream. Don't think I've seen you around here before. And Palladian, let me know if I'm saying that right. It's all good. Hashtag War Diary in the chat. And if you don't win, remember that there will be another one of these later in the stream. So we're going to have two of these per show per week for the next several weeks. So if you don't win this time, and I'm going to ask that if you won already, don't enter again. If you by all means keep entering, but if you've already won one of these, don't send me another one, because that would just be cheesy. Mark Ruggiero, tuning in from Facebook. Welcome, Mark. This is your baby here. Ken Coleman, welcome back. ASL Spotting Round. Am I subscribed to that channel? I would assume so, because I'm subscribed to basically every wargame channel on YouTube, and a couple of other channels too on this account. We're gonna give it just another couple of minutes here. We have pretty good turnout, 72 entries in the giveaway so far. I'm working on kind of a little bit of a show restructure for this Monday night show. That it's not going to dramatically change or anything like that. I just kind of want to sort of reimagine topic selection. Let me put it that way. And we already did that once, and I think that's been real successful. Actually, we're pulling in probably an extra, on average, at least 50 to 75 people on Monday nights since I started doing these more focused shows as opposed to me just ranting for 2 hours. Not that those, I'm sure, were entertaining for somebody. Let's watch this guy make an idiot of himself again. This will be great. But I feel like the structured shows are doing a little better. I just want to mix it up a little bit more. So, all right, we are up to 77. Last call on this first drawing for a subscription to War Diary magazine. Man, let's see if I can show you the registration on this counter here. I don't know if you can see that, but man, that's some dodgy registration. And the counter right under it is perfectly registered. So that is totally a die cutting issue. Last call on War Diary magazine. I'm going to push the button in about 1 minute. So I'm going to taste some of this drinkable scotch first. I think it's fair to say that I like this stuff more than the average person who's going to taste this stuff. Mark, you both of you have our best wishes and full support, of course. So, show topic, best war game ever. We did that. We just took BGG's word for it. Eventually, I'll probably do Gary's top 20 war games of all time. That's probably, but I put a list like that together and then look at it a week later and I'm like, well, who is this person that put this together? Is he on dope? So I mean, I change my mind all the time. That's the problem with that. So you kind of gotta just kind of punch the button on something like that and roll with it, and with the caveats that I'm going to change my mind in a week. All right, I'm pushing the button. Let's see who wins. Pete 41. Pete 41 is the winner. Welcome. Congratulations, Pete. Little thing in my throat. That's smoking too much is what that is. So Ardbeg is a fantastic degreaser as well. So Pete 41, everybody, congrats to Pete. And Pete, please email me. Don't please don't do this through another means. Send an email to ardwulfslair@gmail.com with your name, legal name, and address, the address that's on your mailing address. And we will get that over hopefully tonight, as early as tonight, to for both winners, to the appropriate authorities, and we'll get your subscription in the works. So congrats to Pete 41. All right, now I can pull this down because I don't need that. I will need it later, but I don't need it again now. So Bis Nunez says he first started watching when I would just ramble and was strung out on painkillers. I mean, we did have a nominal topic almost every time. It's just that I would stick to the topic and kind of drift in and out of it. And it's not like that doesn't happen at all now, but we're this is a more focused show than it used to be. And frankly, I think it's a better show that god damn it, that than it used to be for that reason. All right, because we got another one of these, so we got to set that up. All right, let's finish that real briefly. Okay, so let's start with the slideshow. Activate slideshow. Where's the slideshow? Here's the slideshow. All right. The first game we have here is not a great image, but that's what Board Game Geek has. And I've seen this on a shelf. This is a game by designer Glenn Drover. And it is what I would call, I'm really unclear on what the term Ameritrash means, other than that it's intended to reflect games with miniatures, probably, and a lot of dice throwing. Other than that, that's kind of what this looks like. This is from Eagle Griffin Games. Like all Eagle Griffin games that I've seen, it's got a fairly uninspiring cover, but that doesn't necessarily reflect the interior contents at all. It does have little plastic miniatures. It has an area based map, which is pretty attractive actually, and uh, it's got miniatures that don't necessarily look period appropriate to me, but maybe I'm looking at a bad picture, or maybe I'm looking at the wrong picture, and somebody on BGG just screwed it up. So, Clark Commando 1983. That is Mark. So thanks, Mark. A lot of folks only know. This is an interesting point, actually. So, those who are informed about the Battle of Waterloo, right? We did not have this happen in either of our Waterloo games because the British did not seem seriously interested in defending Hougoumont in either game. In the one game, they just pulled out, and in the other game, they just didn't send any extra guys there and didn't reorganize it or anything like that. This is where the French, led by a dude wielding an axe, broke through the gate at Hougoumont, and but the British managed to close the gate behind them, killed them to a man, except for the young drummer boy that had accompanied them. So one of the sort of seesaw moments in that battle, a lot of which revolved around this particular fortified manor house. So this is true. This is named, the cover they've chosen, and the art here is actually pretty cool piece of art, in my opinion. I don't believe it to be my favorite or the greatest piece of Napoleonic era painting. And I'm not sure we're going to see that here. And I'm not sure I'm going to talk about that tonight, because maybe we'll do something cool with that at some point, like put it up as a background or something like that. There's a not the song, but the painting, Scotland the Brave, is what I'm thinking of. Recreated splendidly in the Rod Steiger Waterloo film, by the way, which I watched again relatively recently, and I don't think it's that good. I just don't think it's that good of a movie. For a war gamer, it's awesome, and it's certainly awesome on that level. And there was certainly a good performance out of Rod Steiger and a decent performance out of Christopher Plummer in it. But nobody else really gets a chance to shine. I think that's a real missed opportunity. I'm hoping for more from both the Ridley Scott Napoleon project that's coming, and the to be hoped for Steven Spielberg implementation of the long abandoned Stanley Kubrick project, which latest word on is supposed to be an HBO miniseries, which would be great. I'll be happy to watch that should it actually occur. If it doesn't, it doesn't. So not much I can do about that. let's see. Yeah, that's great. We'll get it in a second. So we're sticking. So Napoleon at Bay will not be relevant here because we're talking about strategic level Napoleonics, and Napoleon at Bay is and the other games in its series are operational level. So TSR version, Failure to Routes mentions the TSR version of Wellington's Victory, great box art. I don't know if I'd say great, but it's good. I think it's a Jeff. Uh, I'm brain cramping on the artist's name. It's not Jeff Easley. It's a guy, the same artist that I think did the cover for the Monster Manual 2, and who passed away relatively recently. Somebody will put this in the chat. Did the cover art for a lot of TSR's war games actually, and it does have a good cover. The map looks ghastly, but the cover is fairly decent. And they did a few good. For Julius Caesar is okay. The cover of um, uh, Gleam of Bayonets is okay. So I mean, they had a lot of talented artists. They had a whole art department. It was not Elmore or Easley. I'm willing to be corrected on Easley, but I don't think so. I think it was. Damn it, I'm drawing a blank on the name. It wasn't Clyde Caldwell either. So Bayonet Brant from the Armchair Dragoons. Welcome back. Is it Scotland Forever? That's the painting I'm thinking of, Jeff Beeler. I wanted to call it Scotland the Grey for some reason. Strategic Napoleonics, John Stanley asks, will of necessity include the naval struggle? Now, something like this Napoleon in Europe, for example, I'm not sure there's not, but I'm not sure there's any naval in it. Why did I put this away? I got more counters to clip here. But I have finished the Americans, so that's something. Not the British yet. I'm not going bananas organizing this thing, actually. I do have Peter Fulford mentions Ney versus Wellington, and that actually uses the Wellington's victory system in a much smaller game, and a smaller battle. It's Quatre Bras is not a tiny battle, but it's obviously not as big as shit. It'll come up because there's at least one cover by that artist here. Anyway, please do thumbs up the video. So if you haven't done that, and we will have another giveaway later in the stream. So our next game, other than Napoleon in Europe, which I don't have a ton of visibility on, is a game that came out a year or two ago, Coalition. This is a release from Compass Games. And it's very attractive. It is a game by Javier Garcia de Gabiola, whose name I think I didn't completely butcher there. And I think Lady Butler may have done this art too, actually, thinking about it. And that's actually a pretty cool piece of art. Now, this is another pretty abstract area movement game on basically the entire period. And I'm gonna mention it now. And last time we talked about this, we Easley is still alive. Larry Elmore is still alive. Clyde Caldwell, pretty sure, is still alive. Keith Parkinson has passed away. That was some time ago. And this guy's name is right on the tip of my tongue, man. He did a ton of stuff for D&D. And I might be mistaken about who did the cover. And if worst comes to worst, I could go grab the fucker off the shelf because I have it in the other room. So this is very abstract. It should play very quickly. You know what, that meandering Mike, I'm going to say it's probably Easley then. Dave Trampier is, no, he never did any of the wargame covers. That would have been cool, but that's not the guy I'm thinking of. But I'm prepared to say that if BGG says Jeff Easley and Ivor M. Jonke are the artists, then it's an Easley cover. And like I said, I could, if I really wanted to, I could go pull it off the shelf. And I might be thinking of Terrible Swift Sword too. That's or Gleam of Bayonets. That's possible. Those are kind of all broadly similar projects from TSR, right? Except that one of them was a new release, although there's definitely signs that it was developed in the SPI days. And the other two are reprints of SPI games where SPI did a better job at the graphic design of the physical components. So in any case, this Coalition, I had a copy of this that they sent me, and I tossed it into a giveaway, and I hope that there was a happy buyer with it. I didn't feel like I had room for this in my library at that time. But the game does not look bad, but it is very straightforward and very simple. And there may be better options coming up here in the list than this that are a little more time tested, at least. Let me put it that way. Another relatively recent release is Andrew Rowland's Napoleon's Imperium. Now, this is a relatively expensive game. It does come in a standard Compass 2-inch box, but it's kind of a packed solid 2-inch box. I think people have generally misunderstood this game to be aimed at being a more rigorous simulation than it is supposed to be, or is trying to be, or is the designer's intent. I think this is very clearly supposed to be a big, fun multiplayer game that's not necessarily on historical rails, and indeed it is not. It is much more similar in that respect to Empires in Arms than it is to something like War and Peace. And it wouldn't surprise me, although Andrew Rowland is apparently no relation to Harry Rowland. Henry Rollins, Jesus. Um, Henry Rollins designing war games. The No relation to Harry Rowland, the fellow who runs Australian Design Group and is the designer of Empires in Arms and Rolling Flames and some other things. Mike Welker says his favorites are the Napoleonic Wars, another game that we'll get to and I'll mispronounce in a moment, and maybe War and Peace. Jeff Anderson says he finds this analogous to Axis and Allies, and I am somewhat in agreement with that. But this is mechanically meatier than Axis and Allies. Not radically so, but there's just kind of more mechanical heft happening here than there is in at least in any of the Axis and Allies games I've played. And as I've said a number of times, I haven't played Axis and Allies since the 80s, and it was the original edition at the time. It is packed, and Compass goes on sale from time to time. And a number of the games that are being mentioned in the chat are in fact going to get mentioned here tonight. The next of which is this thing. Now, this is one of a couple of things here that I don't have a lot to say about because I don't think it's out yet. I might be wrong about that, but I have heard no traffic on this whatsoever. This is from Phalanx. It's called Pursuit of Victory, and it appears to be a Napoleonic game, but there's basically zero information on this thing on Board Game Geek, which is why I kind of think it's not out yet. There are no videos, there are no photos, there's nothing. So I don't know if this is even a thing that is out. I do appreciate that they did put a transparent, an image with a transparent background up, and the box is kind of cool, but that's pretty much all I know. And Phalanx generally does a pretty good job with physical presentation. Let me give them a due props for that. Alistair Logie says that Noble Knight has a spring sale going on right now. I may have missed that, and I may be deleting their emails unread because I'm broke. So that's possible. So when we are talking, though, about multiplayer games, and DMAW mentions that the campaign for War and Peace can get silly, and he's right. That's true, but in almost every case, unless the different nations are really constrained, as they tend to be in the historical scenarios in War and Peace, for example, you're going to run way off the historical rails almost every time. That happens in Empires and Arms. It happens in War and Peace. It happens in the Napoleonic Wars. And it is certainly going to happen in Napoleon's Imperium, which is also a multiplayer game, by the way. And the designer's handmade set to play that with is absolutely off the hook, by the way. So this is certainly true, but that is a feature shared by basically all Napoleonic multiplayer games that are attempting to touch on the subject in a strategic way. All right, so moving on is another game I don't know anything about, and I'm not sure it's out. Once again, it's got a cool cover. Once again, it's by Phalanx. This is listed as a 2023 release, but unlike the previous 2022 release, because we can trust Board Game Geek for that kind of stuff, this is at least in circulation. Okay, Cool cover, if I didn't say that. And there are what are appear to be playtest graphics. This looks pretty Axis and Allies to me, but I don't know that. I think they did a Kickstarter for this. I could be wrong. I know there's like 16 videos listed on BGG, unlike the other one, which has nothing. Um, so even though this is listed as the 2023 release, I feel like this might be out or about to be out. And the other one, Pursuit of Victory, is not out and not about to be out. So don't have anything more to say about this other than to admire the pretty nice box cover. And I guess we're looking at obviously Napoleon and Maria Theresa, and I don't know who any of the other folks are, to be completely honest. Moving along is Swords Around the Throne. This is undoubtedly named after the book. This is a game designed by Renaud Verlac, French designer. I'm pretty sure French designer anyway. And this was released by My Kind of Games, a publisher with whom I am totally unfamiliar. Once again, we got more counters to clip here. I don't know why I'm putting the tray away. Um, are those done? No, those are not done. Are these done? They look done. Screw it. Those might be the ones I clipped the other day. So it's all good. So in addition to being named after what appears to be a very nice book, this actually looks pretty interesting. It's a two-player game, and it is a point-to-point map. I don't know what the expected playtime on this is. This is one of those BGG specials where playtime is listed at 30 to 300 minutes. So I'm really not extracting a valuable piece of information on that. One of those ladies might have been Marie Louise, but I'm pretty sure that the one was Maria Theresa, who was still Empress of Austria when Napoleon first rose to prominence. Um, Frank, I am unfortunately receiving zero kickbacks, so sorry about that. There are occasional benefits, but presumably not as many as people tend to think. But in any case, this does look fairly interesting. And it's kind of a players are the heads of state type of thing. There's not a lot of points on the map. I didn't load any map images. There are cards as well. So it looks to me like a pretty quick playing game, but I could be full of shit. I don't know. Once again, there are a couple of videos on this, one of which appears to be by the designer, actually. So I'm probably going to check that out because this looks kind of interesting. Next up is there's a huge caveat here in that I have not really played this game. I've taken it apart and set it up and kind of noodled with it a little bit. There's a decent amount of video on it. Steve Dolges has done quite a bit of video on it. Somebody else did video on this too, and now I feel like an ass for not remembering who that was. But Steve Dolges has had by far the most content on this game. This is a bit of a kitchen sink design. Okay. This is by again French designer Stanislaw Thomas, who we will see again, and this is his his penultimate word on this topic. He has done no less than 4 of the games that we will be covering tonight, of which this is the third and the first from Compass. Is that correct? Yes, that is correct. Nathan Wise did some video on this too at Wise Guy History. That is absolutely true. Thank you, Jeff Anderson. He is the other person I was thinking of. I don't remember Gilbert doing video on this, but I could be wrong. But in any case, um, this is a game that was really probably hurt fairly badly by a poorly organized rule book upon release. Compass did a sort of semi-second printing of it with existing components that they extracted from the warehouse. But they did reprint the rule book, and the new rule book is better. However, there are at least two different fan rule books on Board Game Geek. The one that Steve Dolges recommends is the one by Banana Man, or I forget what the guy's name is, but it's something like Banana Man, or Banana Maniac, or some kind of banana thing going on. I'm not sure what's up with the banana thing, but which are essentially the actual rules to the game, just kind of presentationally tightened up. The other set of rules on Board Game Geek, how we describe that, I'm not sure. Is does change some things too, where the Banana Man rules attempt to interpret the rules literally and give you that game. Now that is, yeah, I think it is, Jeff Beeler, our first hex encounter game on this subject. It won't be the last, but I was a little bit generous with my definition of strategic Napoleonics, as we'll see as we go through here, because there's at least one or two games that are really kind of operational, but not like operational or something like that. This is a bit of a kitchen sink design. It is a chit pull game. It has cards. The cards are pretty much events, but there are also about things that affect battles and things like that. Um, there's also it's also a leader activation driven mechanic, which is a mechanic I strongly favor for a lot of different topics, including this one. Um, and I think it works pretty well. It is the same basic scale to within some margin of error as War and Peace, with a, let's say, considerably more attractive map and pieces. However, like many games that include cards, this thing is an absolute nightmare to organize. So this is on my list of things to do with 3D printed game organization, because finding the leaders, you've got like, I don't know, 80 leader counters for the French, for example, and they're organized in periods. So they'll some of them will be active in the Revolutionary period, some of them will be active in the Imperial period, some of them will be active in both. So you really got to go a long way to organizing those so that you can find the ones that you need when you need them. Mo from Mo's Game Table is here. Mo, thanks for stopping by. um, yeah, but this is a little different. Jason W says, with all the rule books, it sounds like it's the Labatt of strategic Napoleonics, and that I think it's not a groundless thing to say, but in this case, the different Labatt rule books are like trying to take the same basic tools and interpret them differently, right? They're trying to do different things that the other Labatt systems didn't do to their tastes, right? In the case of Nations in Arms, those efforts are really just trying to fix the rule book that came in the box, right? Now, again, there's at least 3 different revised rule books, and any of those should be fine. You might have a little bit of trouble figuring it out. It is a big game, and there's a lot going on after all. But I really think this is where, in the long run, my own preference on this topic is going to land, is with Nations in Arms. So, all that said, one of the reasons for that, and this is something I'll touch on again, I'm sure, as we come to Stigler, we're not super duper concerned about the actual execution of cavalry charges at this scale. Um, one of the things that Nations in Arms does is it actually covers the period from 1792 to 1805. And almost no Napoleonic games at this scale do that. There's reasons why they don't do that. For example, you've got the Peace of Amiens that breaks out in 1802, 1803, and runs into about 1804, lasts for a little over a year. Brant, you're thinking of Empires in Arms, and rest assured that is on this list. We've got a stray American here. How about that? Not a huge color differentiation on these counters. So, so now there isn't one contiguous campaign that runs all the way from 1792 to 1815. That is basically impossible to do without putting the whole thing on rails. Because if you think about it, if Napoleon doesn't end up on top in say 1801 or 1800, I suppose. What does that period look like? I don't think it looks anything like the period of the Napoleonic Wars that we got, and I don't think it was at all inevitable that Napoleon would have ended up on top. I mean, his coup in 18 Brumaire was basically he shat the bed that day. His younger brother Lucien Bonaparte, completely bailed him out on that day. They later had a falling out, and he lived out the rest of his days in England. So there's that. Mannering Mike says GameCrafter queue is over 1,000. What is it? What game are you waiting on from GameCrafter? Actually, I'm curious. Jeff Anderson says Nations in Arms is more complicated than War and Peace. Yes, that's absolutely correct. It is more complicated than War and Peace. However, um, it is my position that the campaign game, the scenarios are fine, and many of them are absolutely fantastic play experiences on their own. The campaign game of War and Peace is totally busted, and if somebody managed to get it to work, they forced it to do that by not playing by the actual rules that are in the book. So I'm meandering. Mike just ordered Swords Around a Throne. Oh, so is that a Game Crafter production? Because I didn't know that. That's actually super interesting. Um, I've got a third big super duper deluxe crossover game coming at some point, sometime around June, but it's not coming from the Game Crafter. We'll see, and I'll talk about it when it gets here. Until then, I don't know. I don't know enough to say anything. John Longshore says that France should not be played by the worst player generally. No, that's absolutely true. Generally, the strongest player should play France. If it is a multiplayer game. If it's a two-player game, that's a little different. Those are a little easier to balance. Mo wonders if it was a what if Nappy game where he invades Alaska and defeats the polar bear riding Inuit. In that case, I believe Ty Bomba has that coming in an upcoming issue of Paper Wars magazine, so you should possibly check that out. Jeff Beeler says any strategic Napoleonic war games track horse production like pilots and Rolled in Flames. Not to that extent, and in fact, all of these games really have fairly rudimentary production and economic systems, to be honest. The most sophisticated one is probably the one in Empires at Arms, I think. That would be very interesting to see something that did it differently. All right, so next up, after Nations in Arms, Campaigns of Napoleon. This is from West End Games. It's a John Prados design. This does not have a great reputation. It's a decent looking game for its time, bearing in mind that its time was 1980. There's a number of credits on Board Game Geek, but I believe this to be a John Prados design, and the other folks involved. Daniel Scott Poulter was the owner or son of the owner of West End Games. And Eric Goldberg's credited on this too, and he may have done development. I'm not sure. Happy to be corrected on that as well. So this is it's an interesting looking game. It does have a hex map. It's supposed to not work very well from what I understand, but I cannot speak to it. I have a buddy who keeps wanting to sell his copy to me, and I keep balking at it. When that price becomes $5, maybe I'll say, maybe I'll buy it. But as it is, you can get this thing relatively inexpensively. Let me put it that way. And this is a one map game, and it is a hex map, and the hex map covers basically all of Central Europe. Next up is this thing. I have no idea what this is. This is a game by Marco Donadoni, called Bonaparte: The Napoleonic Campaigns. And my first instinct is to say, "Oh, I don't even know what this is. Do I even need to cover this?" But then I look at the map, and the map is basically a more brightly colored looking War and Peace map. So this does appear to cover a good chunk of the period, at least. And in fact, if we read the cover, which I don't know if I can read the cover here, uh, the Napoleonic campaign. Yeah, I'm not reading that text. Forget it. And some of it's in French too. Actually, it looks like it's in German. I don't know. It might be in multiple languages. Um, but in any case, I don't know anything about this. This is by International Team. For those who remember them, they did a number of fairly interesting looking things back in the day, and one might call their graphic design skills rudimentary, even for the 1982. I mean, I think that this is more colorful, so I got to give it at least a point for being more colorful than Campaigns of Napoleon, but it does not look great. And frankly, I'll say the map I think looks better than the original War and Peace map, but certainly not as nice as the updated War and Peace map in the updated version of War and Peace, which is really nice. Um, and in general, the updated version of War and Peace is really nice. I think I have it listed here as its own entry, so I'm sure we'll get to it. So moving on from Bonaparte, one of my personal beefs when people do this is to take the name of an existing game, even if that game was named after a book, or but at least that's a book and this is a game, right? And just use it because they don't care. So such is the case with War and Peace here from Worthington Games. Now I realize the difference here is that War and Peace from Avalon Hill and One Small Step says War and Peace, and this one says War ampersand Peace. And I have no reason to think that this is a stinky game. Don't get me wrong. I'm just going to complain about that. So um, I don't consider it to be a classy move when folks do that. Um, this does allegedly simulate the entire period from 1805 to 1815, or at least the entire, not even the entire imperial period. Napoleon was crowned himself in 1804, and he was in charge of France for a couple of years before that as first consul. So that's kind of I think that's there are some institutional changes that take place in France when or after Napoleon declares the empire, um, but I'm not sure that that's necessarily germane to a military simulation. Let me put it that way. Meandering Mike says that the English translations in the international team games are often quite poor, which I am prepared to believe. Where was international team based? Because I don't actually know that. I was pretty sure they were in Europe somewhere, but I don't know where other than that. So there's miniatures in this. It's cute. There's big areas. There's an area, for example, called France, and an area called Spain. I'm being facile here. It's a little more there's a little more granularity than that. But Neil Bedke says they were in Italy. Okay. And John Longshore says that Leo Tolstoy's attorneys are on the case to get them both. So War and Peace. So Jeff Beeler, I don't know if this has Egypt or not, but the new edition of War and Peace from One Small Step absolutely has Egypt. So moving along, Age of Napoleon. This is another game by Renaud Verloc, produced, and I'm not sure what the publishing arrangement was here exactly, but I had this exact version of it with the names of both Mayfair Games and Phalanx on it. This is a two-player card-driven game, and I would estimate the playtime on here is something like 2 to 4 hours to play the whole thing. It is, and I can recall very clearly that Gilbert Collins did do some video on this game, by the way. This is a fairly decent game. It's really high level. You have like leader names on the counters, but they're really, I'm not sure they represent the leaders, because they also represent the forces as well. Um, but there's a kind of a very streamlined CDG mechanic in here where there are no ops points. You are just spending cards. Um, so this is a game that I think is worth folks' time. Looking at Looking at used prices on BGG, there appears to be ample copies, and they do not appear to be going for large quantities of bread. So there's that. Jeff Beeler asks, how many games allow Russia to invade Switzerland, something that happened historically? So the problem with that is it usually doesn't come up because usually these games do not cover the period in which that occurred. So, which is the pre-imperial period. So usually that's not much of a problem. Now that said, I mean, I don't know. I'd have to look into that. I'm not sure that's worth anybody's time. And I think that it only comes up in those games that cover the revolutionary period, the first and second wars of the coalitions, which is in the war of the second, I think it's second coalition, in which Russian army under Suvorov does in fact invade Switzerland. So William Bird asks about Napoleonic zombie titles. Once again, I will direct you to the latest issue of Paper Wars, containing a fine game by Ty Bamba. So there is a series, and I don't remember the details. I don't remember the names of the books, and I don't remember the author, but somebody might put this in the chat. There was a series of like alternate history fantasy novels featuring fantasy warfare with Napoleon. So I don't remember anything other than that existed. Moving on from Age of Napoleon, we have the classic Mark McLaughlin Napoleonic Wars from GMT. Now, this is probably going to get a new edition from GMT at some point, and if they do, I will be very incensed if it does not get a fairly deluxe edition. This game deserved a mounted map back in the day. It didn't. There was a better map, allegedly better, that was larger, and it was better in that respect. But it was on that card stock that's like, this stuff's worthless. I got to put plexi on top of this stuff anyway. It's worse than paper. That is not a material that I like. I've got a lamp here that's not actually adding any light to the room and yet is heating the room up. So we're gonna turn that off. Um, this the out of the box, this is one map, one paper map. Okay. As a bigger map, it is kind of nice. So if I don't care if it's two maps or one map, but this game deserves a mounted map. It's the kind of game that would work well on a mounted map. This is a multiplayer game that can be played absolutely in a in a single sitting. I wouldn't even say a long day. I'd say 4 to 6 hours if people know what they're doing. This is another one of those games where you absolutely put the strongest player or the player that everybody dislikes on a personal level as France. And then the game will play reasonably historically. If you do not do that, then you're going to get something wildly ahistorical. However, unlike Here I Stand, which is very sensitive to number of players, you really need to have a correct number of players for Here I Stand and Virgin Queen, but that's less true of Virgin Queen. Napoleonic Wars pretty much works fine playing it with two people, up to six. I think you could technically play it with nine, but I don't think you necessarily want to hand anybody Sweden in this game either. So, but you can absolutely play this with two, three, four, five, or six, and it'll be fine. And I think I've played it with two, four, and six personally. It's very good. I would be like I said, I'd be surprised if GMT doesn't bring this back into print at some point. This is William Aaron's. This is absolutely true, but Age of Napoleon is abstract in many other respects as well. So it doesn't bother me because that's the game that's what the game is trying to do, right? The game. This is not like a rigorous. This game is not a rigorous military simulation, and in fact, I'm not sure that any of these are. We might hit some, maybe Nations in Arms. Certainly, Empires in Arms is not. Um, War and Peace is okay in that respect, but Age of Napoleon is a much more abstract game. So I think you're in the wrong place if that's what you're looking for in that particular game. Now, several times this game has been mentioned in the chat, and there has been some video on this by no less than Stuka Joe himself. This is Napoleon Against Europe. This is from Hexasim, and it is another design by Stanislaw Thomas. Now, what I'm wondering now is, did this come out? What is the sequencing of the four games? Did this come out before or after Nations in Arms? I believe it came out after Nations in Arms, but before Pitt's War, which we will also get to, which is the fourth and latest game on this topic by Stanislaw Thomas. So this is an area movement game, unlike Nations in Arms, and it is relatively easy to see this as like a natural follow-up and answer to Nations in Arms, trying to incorporate many of the same ideas with a different mechanical approach and a different model. I would encourage you to watch Stuka Joe's excellent video on this. Although he doesn't play like a complete game, I think he might play a complete turn. I'm not absolutely sure about that. John Longshore thinks this is worth a lot of money, and I am inclined to agree based on what I see. Like new prices on BGG seem to be rolling between 125 and 185. I'm not 100% sure where I got mine. I haven't had a chance to play this. This looks really good, to be fair. I believe this to be playable in a day or two. It's got a very attractive map. It's got very attractive components, like virtually everything from Hexasim. It has pre-rounded counters, so you don't have to take your time doing that. You still got to organize them, right? You still want to You still want them tidy for when you actually want to play the thing. There are also at least two different editions of this, and it is my understanding that you do want the second edition rules at least. I'm not sure if there are any differences in the actual components. Um, Jim Ozarski, I thought you might make an appearance here. Says Age of Napoleon is a Euro flavored war game and a really good one. That's pretty much my analysis of it too. For somebody that's looking for a game on this topic at that scale, that's of that type, I think Age of Napoleon is an excellent selection, and you can get it pretty cheap too. Gen Chaos 33 says he really likes NAE, Napoleon Against Europe, very good CDG, in his opinion, the best. Better than Empire of the Sun. I'm not sure I agree with that, but there is so I feel like Empire of the Sun is one of the best games on its topic, and it's furthermore one of the best CDGs. But one of the reasons frankly, that I like it as much as I do is it's on a hex map as opposed to some area or point-to-point map that a lot of these games kind of move towards. Okay. There are definitely design challenges that Empire of the Sun faced that something like Napoleon Against Europe does not have to face because it is satisfied with an area movement map. That's absolutely, I don't know, absolutely, but I feel like that is a correct statement. Carl Crater from the Wargame Bootcamp says there's an update kit for Napoleon Against Europe that goes for $500. Don't know if that's actually true or not, but do we have an expansion info? Nope, we don't have any information on that. That might be something that HexSM still has too. That's plausible. I would consider it when I need information on Napoleonic topics. Jim Ozarski is the fella that I run to. So, all right, we have actually finished all the unit counters here. And I might be done clipping for the night. That'd be pretty early to be done clipping. I don't know who this green one is. Not sure. Free French, possibly. That's possible. Could be those Norwegians that fought in this battle. So yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure. Honestly, I'm not sure. Thinking about it right now, which version of this I have. I do have it though, and it was not easy to get, but I didn't pay a mint for it at the time either. But I didn't get it new. I got it used, maybe off the Facebook Marketplace. That's the best of my recollection. Hexy is in the chat. Welcome back to the show. Thanks for stopping by. All right, next up is La Guerre de l'Empereur, the Emperor's War, 1805 to 1815. So you might wonder, where's Kevin Zucker in this conversation? Here's Kevin Zucker in this conversation. This is a game produced, I'm fairly sure this was an OSG game, right? From 1997. This is also an area movement map, but it's more conventional presentation. Let me put it that way. It is an unattractive game, in my opinion. It is a physically unattractive game. It's on a paper map, which itself is fine. I just don't like the map, and I don't like the counters. I have every reason to assume that the game is good because it is Kevin Zucker and he knows what he's talking about on this particular topic. I'd love to see somebody. Did somebody redo the counters for this? It kind of looks like OSG might have redone the counters for this, looking at this. I'm not sure if that's true or not, which means I need to get an unpunched copy of The Son of Austerlitz, is what it sounds like. Because if the counters were more attractive, then this would be a completely different thing. I somehow got to The Son of Austerlitz here. So I can't really speak to this. I've seen the game, I've looked at it on a table, and I don't know much about it other than saying that it's Kevin Zucker, and I trust Kevin Zucker as a designer on Napoleonic topics. I just think this particular game is fairly unattractive. Next up is James Holloway. As soon as I saw the friggin' picture, I knew the artist's name. That's the guy I was thinking of, and he did pass away in the last 2 or 3 years. Did a lot of D&D work. This is TSR's La Grande Armée, and this is a different game than the SPI Legrand Armée. This is by design credit here is to Mark Akers. And I think that this is actually this existence of this game is actually why I picked up a copy of the SPI um, um, Legrand Armée, because I wanted to be able to compare the two, and I just have not had the time to do that. Stuka Joe is in the chat. Thanks, Joe, for stopping by. So whereas the original Legrand Armée sort of covers operational Napoleonic campaigns in Central Europe in pretty much 1805 to maybe 1807, this covers 1805 all the way to 1815, including Russia, but not including the Peninsular War. So I've got this, and it appears to be a tremendously promising game. But everybody that I've talked to that's actually played it has said it has serious problems. In addition to having relatively unattractive pieces, as one might expect from a TSR game from 1987. They, let's say, maybe didn't have their firmest footing on the ground. And this is the exception I was talking about as I want to count this because it's got so much, because it covers so much, but it's really an operational game and not a strategic game. Although, like many operational games inside and outside of Napoleonics, it does sometimes flirt with strategic and even tactical ideas sometimes. At some point, this is a big 4-map game, by the way. There's something like 1,200 counters, might even be 1,600 counters. It's a big game. Nevertheless, it does not go for a giant pile of money. I am also aware of no serious effort to turn this thing around and turn this into a great game. That I think might actually be in there, but one might have to, let's say, do some post-release development on it that one shouldn't have to do. It occurs to me that these markers are extremely phallic looking. Anyway, I don't believe this to be a bad cover, as Stigler seems to, but I will say that it does not feel particularly Napoleonic, and that's the case with a number of the TSR covers that are good art, but don't necessarily match the feel of the period. In some cases, that may be the viewer's baggage when you see the Larry Elmore cover on one of their war games. You just don't think of Larry Elmore as a historical artist because we've seen him do so many dragons and paladins and elves. So a little lurid, but I don't know that necessarily more lurid than an actual period painting. Another thing, though, is that it's trivial to find period paintings in the public domain, whether Getty Images is claiming copyright on them or not, and use those as your cover art rather than have Jeff Easley or James Holloway or Clyde Caldwell do your art for you. There is a big goofy head in there too, and I understand you got to put Napoleon on the cover of the Napoleon game, so I don't know that they managed. They went out of their way to make Terrible Swift Sword ugly. I think that was actual effort involved in that particular step, because it's a damn ugly. John Longshore says that the finial on the Austrian standard is wrong. Maybe, but I don't care. Moving right along. I could not possibly leave this out. I decided I could not leave this out. This is Risk Edition Napoleon. This is now a pricey collectible. I'm not sure where this got released. Certainly, I did not ever see this when it was available, if indeed it was ever actually available in the United States. And I am not sure that it was. I'm not sure that it wasn't, but I'm not sure that it was. But in any case, it's pretty much it's Risk, but it's just Europe, as has been the case with certain other Risk variants as well. I mean, Risk does, after all, have sort of a vaguely Napoleonic tone. It is not set in any actual period of history, of course, but it's always had, you've kind of always had the armor and not the armor, but the artillery and the cavalry and the infantry on the cards, and even though the game mechanics don't do anything with that notably, but it is, nevertheless, it's usually had, and sometimes the trade dress on the boxes have backed that up, and sometimes they haven't. That it's kind of intended to be a vaguely Napoleonic or possibly 19th century thing. John Longshore says, of course, Napoleon must guard Australia at a hole up in Australia at all costs. Stuka Joe says that pink should be banned in war games. Please put that in an email and send that to Multi-Man Publishing immediately. And Stigler mentions the Pepto Bismol color. That color is literally in a couple of games that they've done. Not in the last couple of years that I've noticed, but not that long ago either. So like the French units in 1914. That old Avalon Hill pink was exceptionally egregious, I have to say. But I didn't think I could leave this out. Contains 800 figurines. So that appears to be a English, right? It's English on that. I hope we didn't just lose the chat, lose our internet connection, by the way. So I think that's English on the cover, I guess. No, it's French. Never mind. So, um, hmm. Or the German units, or the Confederate units in the old Gettysburg, or any of that stuff. So anyway, Risk Napoleon. It's cute. I'm not gonna buy it. This is a fairly pricey collectible nowadays. Would it be neat to have this? Sure, it would be, but I ain't. No, we're not buying that. Next up is Victory and Glory. Now, this is one of a couple of these that there's a computer version of. And this one, unlike the other one, you can get the other one is Empires in Arms, by the way, which you need to buy directly from Matrix Games. This you can buy on Steam. And other than having other than having Jim Ozarski's favorite purple Prussians, this is supposed to be a fairly decent game. This is yet another sort of, and again, I have a enormous confusion over the Ameritrash terminology, but I'm going to use that term because it's got the things that we associate with those kinds of games. Lots of figures, a lot of dice, all that stuff, kind of moving back and forth here. Actually, I'm not sure about the dice, but I know there's plastic figures in a variety of lurid colors, but there are also tiny blocks. So there's that. Actually, these aren't even figures. These are meeples, which I think I would prefer over figures, actually. Anyway, I've heard good things about this game, and if you want to try it and don't want to shell out whatever the board game costs, you can run down a copy on Steam, which when it's on sale is probably something like $10 or $15. New copies running from $40 to $55 on Board Game Geek. That is in any event not bad. John Longshore says that the board game is not as good as the PC game. All right, next up, Soldier Emperor by Rob Markham. Napoleon's Wars 1803 to 1815, which is interesting. Okay, so this, first of all, is a game by Rob Markham, who has done good work elsewhere. It is also a game from Avalanche Press, which has done some good work over the years. I will also say that it is a point-to-point map. The map looks pretty cool and may actually be a little overdone. Jeff Beeler, thank you so much. Much appreciated. Why am I not seeing that in the chat? So the usual start date for Strategic Napoleonics is in fact 1805, and that makes me curious as to what exactly this is covering starting in 1803. Certainly, there are things happening in 1803, but I don't know that I'm getting any of that information from the description here. This again is kind of thing that maybe Avalanche Press isn't bad at. Actually, their other Soldier Emperor, Soldier King, I think I believe a game about Frederick the Great, is also supposed to be fairly good, and maybe this is kind of in that general family of stuff. Now, Rob Markham, of course, has been involved with a lot of very good things, including Raid on Saint Nazaire and a ton of stuff, including some stuff from Clash of Arms and a variety of S&T games. A lot of S&T games, actually. Wonder how many of these I have. Not more than one or two. Soldier Emperor is not one that I have, and it's one that I'm not going to particularly investigate because I don't need any additional products from Avalanche Press. But if, on the other hand, I see this for a really good price, I might buy it out of idle curiosity. That has been known to occur. Um, so William Aaron says that Victory and Glory Napoleon runs from 1796 to 1815. Yeah, but that's not exactly a simulation either, right? That's sort of a that's a I think it's going to come off as manifestly unfair when I say it is about as much a simulation as Risk is. I think that's too strong a statement, but it's not trying to be a serious simulation or simulate the period in any real concrete way. In much the same way that, say, a Napoleon's Imperium is not as well. Mike Welker says that notorious for being underdeveloped from Avalanche Press. That's absolutely true. Nowadays, I mean, I feel like it's a little bit understandable since Avalanche Press appears to be Mike Benninghoff, and that's basically it, as far as I could tell. But I certainly had that sense trying to play Panzer Grenadier as well. Now, I can't vouch for every Panzer Grenadier product. I can only vouch for the couple that I had and played. But yeah, underdevelopment was an issue there. Mike Welker also says that it would be cool to have a For the People treatment of the Napoleonic Wars, sort of an up-complexified game of Napoleonic Wars. I'd be interested in something like that. I can tell you that. The GMT Napoleonic Wars is very much a step down in complexity from something like For the People. It's not a huge step down, but it's a step down, right? It streamlines a lot of the basic. It's a classic Herman-esque CDG. In that you've got cards, you got a hand of cards, you can play the cards for the events, or you can play the cards for the points, and you can do various things with those points. But it's nevertheless a lot simpler, and one might even say less fiddly than For the People is. And I love For the People. I think it's a fantastic game, but it is a bit fiddly. I don't think that's something that anybody's going to argue with. Jeff Beeler has managed to end up with 1.5 copies of Soldier Raj, the India expansion for Soldier Emperor. So I'm unclear as to what an expansion for that is accomplishing, actually. I mean, I guess Wellington's fighting over there, so that's something, but I'm not sure that that's really a theater that the conflict of the Napoleonic Wars is terribly concerned with. As opposed to the Caribbean, right? I think you can get something out of that, but that says to me that the existence of such a thing says to me, whether this is a good assumption or not, that the game is going to be super abstract and not overly concerned with modeling history in any way. There isn't actually anything wrong with that, by the way. But it does tend to mean that it is a game that I personally might be less interested in once I hear that statement. We are going to have to fight with the plastic tray lid to get that back on, because that 50-year-old plastic tray lid is not in great shape. David Imperato, welcome back to the stream. He says that Mike should do it. Did a great job with 30 Years' War and Mexican War. Yeah, I mean, I'd be very interested in seeing something like that, to be completely honest about it. By all means. Joe Perez has managed to offend Avalanche Press and has been receiving retaliatory mail since then, which I think is pretty fantastic. By the way, somebody, I don't know, I'm like, did I buy this? The book showed up, Napoleon's Marshals, edited by David Chandler. It's a series of essays by other writers mostly. And it's a book I had my eye on, and I don't remember mentioning it. And somebody, I mean, I got it from eBay, an eBay seller. And I didn't buy it. So somebody sent me this. Didn't get a note or anything. So whoever random Napoleon's Marshals person is, thank you. I did add it directly to the Napoleonic Research Library. And it will be useful for that, by the way. All right, next up is La Grande Empire. This is another game by Stanislaw Thomas, and this is the first of his four efforts at covering the Napoleonic Wars. Now, this is, as far as I know, not in English. There might be an English translation of it. I don't know that it's. I don't know that it's any good. And this is again a hex and counter Napoleonic game that looks a lot more like Nations in Arms than it does Napoleon against Europe, which in turn also looks a lot like Pitt's War, as we'll see. I will say, who is this? This is Pratt's and Editions. Yep, this. You look at the box, and that box screams Pratt's and Editions to me. I own one Pratt's and Editions game, and it's in a box that looks just like this. And it's unfortunately not this one, because I'd be interested in seeing this. This is a fairly interesting looking game. John Longshore, thanks so much. I'm getting the notifications up there. John, was that you? Does that mean that was you that sent that book? But thanks for the super chat too. Thanks. I don't know what to say. In any case, Le Grand Empire from Stanislaw Thomas here does look pretty interesting, and I'm kind of interested in what this designer has to say on this topic. And I don't know that it's particularly easy for me to obtain a copy of this. It's easier to obtain in Europe, apparently, because all of the sellers are in Europe, and I don't want to pay $75 for the game and then $75 to get it shipped over here. So Michael Webb, he enjoys the Napoleon Bonaparte podcast by Cameron Riley and David Markham, 60 hours plus for $20. I am listening for free to the Age of Napoleon podcast, and I got to get caught up. I'm about half a dozen episodes behind at this point. I think he is past Eylau and is if either just done Friedland or is about to do Friedland. That is an excellent podcast. You can be a patron if you want, and but otherwise it's free. But I'll check this out too. I don't object to paying for this stuff after all. All right, so Le Grand Empire is kind of one of those back burner wish list things. It's like, yeah, it'd be kind of nice to have this, but it's going to be a lot of trouble to have this, and I don't know that I'm going to go through that trouble, so we're going to ignore that for now. So next up is the classic legendary Empires in Arms by Harry Rowland. This is the, I think, much better known Avalon Hill cover, and this is really good cover, by the way. The game was originally released by the Australian Design Group in a cover that's not terrible, but it's not nearly as attractive as this. Is this a Roger McGowan cover? One would think that this is a Roger McGowan cover. Apparently not. George Parrish. That's what I'm seeing here. Okay, great cover. This is a classic. This is kind of a Napoleonic sandbox, and it's also one of the few games. This isn't in the box. You had to go outside the box, either to the general or to the fan community, to get the revolutionary period scenarios for Empires in Arms. And again, I think you have problems expanding that revolutionary period into the imperial period past 1805 or so without stretching credulity and or putting the whole thing on rails. This is unquestionably, as Jeff Anderson says, a great game. And it is a multiplayer game in which I think it accommodates up to 8, as I recall. This says 2 to 7, but I don't trust BGG on anything like this. It also says weight 4.41, and this is fairly complicated, but the combat model is not that complicated. At least there's a lot. This is the game that's probably doing more as an economic political simulation than it is as a military simulation. This is not a simulation. You shouldn't think of it in those terms. In fact, I have some on occasions said and taken a little bit of flack for it, and I'm probably exaggerating to some extent when I say this, but I'm not pulling this out of my ass either. I'm not sure this is a war game. I think this is a complex RPG simulation of the Napoleonic period. But part of why I get away with saying that is because there's really not a lot like this. This is really kind of its own thing. I think the closest thing we have to this is something like Napoleon's Imperium, which is a much simpler game, or Europa Universalis at the price of I blew my nuts off picking this box up the other day. So although this is more complicated than Europa Universalis, the price of power, but possibly not more complicated than probably not more complicated than the video game. Let me put it that way. There's a lot of good Napoleonic flavor here. Jeff Beeler says that it gives a great sense of how the different countries organize their armed forces. This is true, but each country has like a special ability, right? And this is another reason why I consider this maybe less of a war game than a lot of people seem to think, just because it's got Napoleon on the box. Every country has like a special game busting ability, right? This is straight out of design trick, straight out of Cosmic Encounter. And those abilities are clearly exaggerated for the sake of balancing them for play. Let me put it that way. Again, there's nothing wrong with that. And I certainly think you can get a good simulation out of Empires in Arms. A lot of the tools are there. But you end up with, because this just doesn't work without the full complement of players, to be honest. I think you get away with 5, but 4, I'm not sure you can. And with less than that, I would play something different. I'd rather play Napoleonic Wars, at least to be finished that afternoon. This is another thing. This plays really well by email. There is a vassal module. Unfortunately, I've heard the vassal module is not very good. I haven't personally looked at that. This would play really well over vassal via email. Steiger was fantastic in Waterloo. He's the only actor that gets the chance to actually perform. The movie's really hurt by the sort of laser focus on just Napoleon. You can make somebody like Ney interesting without subtracting from Rod Steiger as Napoleon. And I don't think the movie does that. It does with Blucher, but not with Ney. Ney is think about it. Ney's a centrally important figure in Waterloo, right? And he's just a chode played by some random American actor who happens to look a lot like Ney. So I think it's a disappointing movie on a lot of levels. Let me put it that way. We're going to do another giveaway right now, actually. So let's do that. All right. So we have another giveaway of that has worked out surprisingly well. We have another giveaway of a subscription to War Diary magazine. If you are the winner, you will email me at ardwulfslair@gmail.com. That is the email address in the ticker with your information, your actual name, and your actual address that has your actual name on it. And I will get that to the correct people that will get those subscriptions out to you. Hashtag we love Mark. So we love Mark. We want Mark to fully recover. We want his wife to fully recover. And we are all 100% in support of him. And thanks, of course, to Mark for the giveaway subscriptions, by the way. These are courtesy of Mark and War Diary magazine as well. So we got good numbers here already. So we'll let this cook for just a minute. Can I pull this over while we're doing that? Not without putting this. There we go. You guys would probably be more comfortable if we had the stream set up like this, but I'm not going to actually do that. Is that actually going to work? I could talk about Empires in Arms for a couple of minutes. That's actually okay. So this is another one of those really unique games. There's really not a lot that's directly comparable to it. It is a sort of massive multiplayer political, military, and economic simulation of Europe in this period. And if you buy into the extra stuff, you acquire the fan made scenarios or whatever. You could start this thing in 1492 and see where it goes, and you might have something radically different. I would expect that you'll have something radically different than history in that respect. Now, there is a computer adaptation of this game that requires a little bit of explanation. So one of the efforts that had happened in the wake of this Avalon Hill going away and this game becoming unavailable and out of print is that some fans kind of put together a quote unquote enhanced rule set for it called Empires in Harm. Harm with an H. And presumably this was supposed to be some kind of amusing pun. And maybe I'm just a big wet blanket, but I don't get it or think it is amusing. But in any case, one might say enhanced, another person might say badly bloated. This was available on the internet for some time until the Matrix Games people said, "Hey, we want to do Empires in Arms. That'd be cool." And they actually licensed it or bought it or whatever from the Empires in Harms people. And that rule set is no longer readily available on the internet. I'm sure you can find it. It is, in my opinion, bloated and turns this entire thing into a giant unwieldy mess. So, not recommended from me. But when Matrix Games had their Christmas sale, I did actually buy Empires in Arms as well. So at some point, I will load this computer game up and have a look at it. But it's not just straight Empires in Arms. It's this super duper enhanced edition with a 200-page rule book version. So not necessarily recommended by me. All right, folks. So we got 64 entries so far. So I'm going to give that another couple of minutes. Hashtag We Love Mark in the chat to win a subscription to War Diary magazine. I'll hide this for just a moment, though, while I pull up and talk about the next game, N, the Napoleonic Wars. Kind of clumsy title, kind of an interesting cover, and a pretty interesting looking game by Ben Madison. This is from White Dog Games. This is a solitaire game. It is very abstract, but unlike a lot of Ben Madison's solitaire games, a lot but not all, it's not really a States of Siege thing. It's a fairly different design. I have this. I have not had the chance to play it yet. Did it make it to my solitaire shelf? It did make it to my pared down solitaire shelf, which has room for, it's actually about half empty. There's two solitaire shelves up here, one of which has room for about one more game, and the other of which is about half empty. But that means I got to find another space for Edelweiss. Um, Daniel O'Hurley, he played Nay in Waterloo. He's actually Irish, so that's, well, ultimately, yeah. He does look just like Nay. So that's pretty cool. And the guy they got to play Blucher looks just like Blucher and has a great Blucher line in it that I'm not going to repeat. It's on YouTube. You can go find it. Patty Rafeski, thanks for stopping by. Welcome back to the stream. Hashtag We Love Mark to win a subscription to War Diary magazine. I'm going to give this about another 1 minute. Stuka Joe did do video on N, the Napoleonic Wars, and that's what piqued my interest in it as well. One can trace a long and sordid history of me seeing Stuka Joe videos and say, "Oh shit, I need that." So, but it does look fairly interesting. One of these days, I'll actually get the chance to play it, and it is solitaire, and it's got a lot of the sort of characteristics of White Dog Productions, where it's got the counter tray, which is like a setup card that you lay the counters all out on. The mission is like that as well, which is I think that's a Ben Madison and a co-designer game. That's a terrific game, not Napoleonic, obviously. But this might be a co-design with somebody as well. But this is a pretty interesting looking game. It's very high level. It's very abstract. So you're, again, not going to get a detailed simulation of the period out of this. But if you bought this, that wasn't what you were looking for. All right, I'm going to hit the button. So, and John Longcrow's being a wise guy. So I didn't want to use the profanity this time. Rob Schanlaub. Ron Schanlaub is our winner. Ron Schanlaub, congratulations. Ron Schanlaub, please come to the white courtesy phone by me, which I mean, send me an email with your information, and I will get that over to the folks at War Diary magazine and loop Mark in on that as well. So congratulations to Ron Schanlaub. Let me know if I'm saying that incorrectly. 57 times. So, all right. So, oh shit. Well, okay. So, Gen Chaos 33. I do have things to say about this. This I think doesn't count as strategic Napoleonics. It is moderately simulative operational that zooms into reasonably abstract tactical. Okay. This is Field Commander Napoleon. I don't think it counts as a strategic level Napoleonic game for that reason, but I do think it's a really good game, and I do have a very high opinion of it. And if you are in the market for that, a bunch of people have done video on that. Marco did video on that. Stuka Joe may have done video on that. There's tons of video on Field Commander Napoleon. So if you want to check that out, there's a lot of video to explore, and I do think it's an outstanding game. I think it's the best thing that DVG has done, frankly. Which is not a condemnation of DVG, right? It's a really good game. And if I had one desert island solitaire game that was like a solitaire game and not, well, I'll just play World and Flame solitaire. It's probably Field Commander Napoleon. RAF is pretty up there too. Is pretty up there too. Yeah. Yeah, I'd say Field Commander Napoleon and runner up RAF. So the other Field Commander games are either not as good or I haven't looked at them and they are do not have strong reputations, like, for example, Field Commander or Fleet Commander Nimitz, which I think has been a bit of a shit show. All right, next up is so this is the Okay, so this is the Avalon Hill War and Peace, designer Mark McLaughlin. This is an excellent game with exceptionally primitive graphics by modern standards. This is a slightly different but equally excellent game with outstanding modern graphics from One Small Step. It is also out of print again already, despite having gotten at least two and maybe as many as three printings from One Small Step in this edition. Um, there are some changes between the Avalon Hill original and this version of the game. Mostly those changes are for the better. I do not believe that the changes that they made to the campaign game. So War and Peace has a bunch of different scenarios. So there's a Peninsular War scenario and a Third Coalition scenario and a invasion of Russia scenario and a bunch of other scenarios. This edition also includes the Egyptian campaign scenario, by the way. Um, there is also a grand campaign that takes you from 1805 to 1815. Okay. And it's the grand campaign played multiplayer that just doesn't work. You can get it to work if you play it two players and extrapolate some things. But if you try to play it multiplayer, you'll find that the diplomatic aspect of it is just not there. And I'm talking about the original. Okay. You'll find a lack of rules for telling you when the Austrians can surrender, for example, in 1805, which is kind of an important thing. When do the Austrians surrender? Can they just surrender and end the war right now? Because they're going to be tempted to, because then they're going to preserve their shabby little army, right? In 1805, there's no comparison between the French army and the Austrian army. The Austrian army in later years in the Napoleonic period is better, thanks in large part to the reforms that Archduke Charles fought tooth and nail to get in, uh, to the extent that he got them in. Um, so the scenarios for War and Peace work. They're really operational scenarios, but they work really well. It's a tremendous game. It's just that the grand campaign does not particularly work. The new version of War and Peace has some refinement to the basic game for the scenarios, like the hex sides. So the in the original game, the rivers run through the middle of hexes. I don't know why that was considered to be a good idea. It's just easier to do it on the hex edges. Um, so the new version does that, right? And there's a lot of little things like that. There are also changes to the campaign that I'm not at all convinced that fix the campaign. So campaign at your own risk. But if you play the scenarios, some of which are long and beefy, right? It's not like you're just playing for a half an hour. Um, then I think you can get more than your enjoyment that you paid for out of either version of this game. Now, the good news is that the original can be had at a ridiculously inexpensive price, provided you display a little bit of patience. You should be able to get a good condition punched copy for $20, $25, or something like that. Yes, there are people asking for more. Those people are dopes. Don't buy from them. The bad news is that if you want this fancy new copy, you are probably going to pay kind of over $200. It is really nice. Physically, it's really nice. The counter colors are an interesting choice in that they're a bit pastel, and I'm not sure that I like that, particularly in the case of the British, but because that's pink, right? Um, but uh, on the other hand, the alternative of making them bright red would have created potential contrast problems. In contrast, the counters for the original War and Peace, maybe somebody got a cleaner set than I've ever seen, but I've handled 4 or 5 copies of this thing over the years, and the counter quality is dire, okay? Not only do you have all the traditional die cutting problems of traditional Avalon Hill garbage die cutting, but you also have horrific contrast issues, tiny print, bleed of the colors. These counters are the only thing that salvages them at all is that there's very little information on them. There's like a dude or a dude on a horse and a number, except for the leaders, which do have names, but then they're hard, they're super hard to read. So there's a lot of readability problems with this counter. In addition, the map is unattractive. This has beautiful components. I have no compunction about recommending this, but it's expensive, so bear that in mind. Noble Knight is selling this right now. I don't see condition on what I'm looking at. Noble Knight's price on this is $595. That's expensive. Then again, I think One Small Step probably plans another printing of this at some point. I got in on the last Kickstarter, which I think was the second Kickstarter. Yep, this is true. And there are also and for the minor powers. So if you have like say Bavaria, right? That's a French controlled minor. You'll have like a little BA or something like that on the counter in teeny tiny print into which the blue has bled into the white, so you can't read it at all. So there is other information on at least some counters that makes it just really difficult to read. Um, Also, you have to know the little codes, which I guess is not any different than knowing the little flags. They put the little flags on there. But in terms of component quality, especially counter quality and map quality, I mean, there's no comparison here. I think I did an unboxing of this. I might be wrong. So terrific game. It's worth your time, but it's a lot easier to get an old Avalon Hill version than it is the new one. All right, right on time, pretty much. We are getting to our last game, Pitt's War. This is the fourth and last strategic Napoleonic game from designer Stanislaw Thomas and the second from Compass Games. This, if you look at this map, you'll say, "Ooh, this looks a lot like Napoleon against Europe," except that there are no cards. This is a considerably streamlined game from Napoleon against Europe. Um, but the map does look a lot like the map to Napoleon against Europe. So, of the four, this appears to be by far the simplest game, and it is, after all, a magazine game. This looks pretty interesting. I've got 3 of these 4 games. Le Grand Empire is, of course, the one that I don't have and probably will never own. But this also looks fairly interesting, and I would certainly like to give this a spin at some point. And in fact, as Stuka Joe knows and has said many times, magazine games make good videos because they tend to be relatively short, relatively small. Experiences vary on that. Some of them aren't that short. But this looks like a pretty interesting game that I personally would like to give a shot to at some point. I really, again, like what this designer has to say about this topic, even if maybe the execution has not been absolutely optimal in all cases. All right. So, Brant, thanks for stopping by. First of all, Tuesday News Day on the Armchair Dragons website tomorrow. That's great. Ken X or Ken 10 says he missed Nations in Arms, which is the only one that he has. Or War, Peace, and Nations in Arms, the only 2 games with hexes. No, we covered several other ones. I may have closed a bunch too. But off the top of my head, Nations in Arms, Bonaparte, the Napoleonic campaigns, Le Grand Armée, if we're saying that's strategic. I'm not sure that it is. Um, uh, Le Grand Empire, which good luck finding that. So no, there's a couple extra ones that are games with hexes. I don't like hate games with no hexes, right? I have a preference for hexacounter war games that involve some element of maneuver, and hexes are good at that. So I tend to lean into hex games, frankly. We shouldn't fool ourselves into thinking that a hexagon map provides more precision than it really is. Yes, Eric from Eric's Table, Napoleonic Battles. First of all, thanks for stopping by. He is streaming pretty much any second over on his channel, Eric's Table, Napoleonic Battles. Lavatai to Austerlitz, which starts tonight. I am going to hop over there and watch that. I'm going to do it on my phone because I'm going to go outside. But after this show. So by all means, go check that out. It's going to be pretty cool. I believe they're using the premiere rules for the big battle of Austerlitz. And a couple of the people that were playing with us at Labatt Fest at Buckeye Game Fest will be involved in that game as well. It is not identical, but stylistically, it's very similar. Other than that, the two games appear notably different. And Alan Salazar saying that the map for Le Grand Empire looks the same as Nations in Arms, and it it does look the same, but I believe that it is actually different art, possibly by the same artist. Because there's some stylistic things that look the same. In particular, those mountains look the same, but I think if you compare the two, I think you're going to find that they're not exactly the same. It started to rain here pretty much right before the show started. So, what is on deck? We are continuing the last Blitzkrieg campaign, which is now moving at a Blitzkrieg-like pace. I'm happy to say we got. I'm not sure the other half of the map got quite as far as we did on the north half of the map, but we got an entire turn done in 3 hours last week. So with adding that fourth person just helps tremendously, tremendously. So otherwise, I got a priority to get this done. I got to get this freaking thing all in pieces now, taken apart. I got to print counter trays for this, and I got pieces and parts all over the place. I got a whole wall of cards over here just off camera for Europa Universalis, which again looks pretty good. I also picked up Eclipse, the second edition of Eclipse, which also looks pretty good in a very different way. Space 4X game, true Space 4X game, as opposed to TI4, which I don't think is. I think it's only a 3X game. People argue with me about that. No, there's exploration. Nah, there really isn't. It's just random shit. Random shit happens. That's all. And I love Twilight Imperium, but this is a sort of much more focused and finely tuned Euro style mechanics than TI has. So, and I'm fine with that. I kind of wanted a different experience from that. The other sort of game in that space that I was thinking about is the War of the Ring, which I've played but I've never owned. But I don't need that. To be honest, I just don't need that. And as Daniel Brown points out, I need to make a phone call on the hotel. I'm actually going to not do it at 10 p.m. tonight. I'm going to write myself a note for morning and stick it on the work laptop so it will be the first thing I see in the AM. And I should probably pick a pen that friggin' works, huh? So I do need to make that call. Like I said, I don't want to get stuck paying for a second hotel. That would suck. But on the other hand, the second hotel is friggin' cheap. That's why I made that reservation. This was the luxurious travel lodge in delightful Grove City, Ohio. So not exactly not exactly close, right? But it was a lot cheaper, and it actually is sold out for Origins. William Aarons mentions that I didn't mention John Pratos's Before and Beyond Waterloo, which is a strategic game. I will agree that it's a strategic game, but the reason I didn't cover it is it only covers 18. It's really only 1815, and then the expansion Beyond or Before Waterloo extends it into 1814 with an additional scenario for that. This game definitely deserves a look. And this is there was a redo of this, like a deluxe. It's not really deluxe, but there was a new edition of this from Against the Odds that came out around last year, and I did pick it up with the expansion and all that stuff. And it does look actually pretty cool. I used to do Motel 6, and unfortunately, the clean, comfortable room, they left out they now leave out the clean and comfortable, and it's like $90 a night. So no, thank you. We aren't paying $90 a night to come home, spend the night with bed bugs and cockroaches. No, thank you. If it was clean and it was cheap, I'd be all over it. But it is not that cheap anymore, and nobody's that cheap anymore. But it's not that clean either, and I don't want to stay in some nasty ass hotel. So this way, I get to stay at the Hyatt, and I'm splitting it, but it's not like I'm splitting it with some bozo who's going to bail on me. I know. In fact, it's the same fellow that I bought this off of. So we've roomed together before. It's gonna be fine. It does change my plans for Origins Sunday, as in I'm not gonna be there. But that's okay. I'm okay. I don't have to leave super early on Saturday, so if I stay till 10 p.m. on Saturday, that's fine, and I'll just drive home. It's all good. No, 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 not the vomit guy. He's dead, so we can't. We won't be conventioneering with him anymore. So all right. Hopefully, everybody has enjoyed the show. We had excellent numbers, which I did not pull up because it did not occur to me to pull up these numbers before I started the show. And I don't really like to have to fumble with computer bullshit while the show is actually going on, but I'm literally doing that as we speak. So we have what did we pull tonight? Looks like pretty good. We pulled 145, something like that, 146, something like that. Looks numbers look really good. So I would like to thank everybody for coming tonight. I don't have a topic picked out for next week. I've got like a list of ideas that I keep shit canning and coming up with new ideas. So I probably won't have a Traveler Tuesday video tomorrow, but I will presumably have an unboxing video, which might be this giant 45-minute Europa, your Universalis magnum opus. So I would like to thank everybody. Please head over to Eric's channel and check his Labatai de Austerlitz game out. If you are at all curious about Labatai, you will get a sense of it and how it plays in their game on that. And the premier rules move rapidly, so that'll be great as well. So everybody have a great night. We'll be back tomorrow night at 7:30 with Dan. And then we'll be back with this show on Monday night at 8 p.m. at the usual time. So everybody have a great night, and we will see you next time.